Welcome to the deep dive. So we're digging into the source material you sent us, and it really tackles this fundamental conflict, maybe one of the biggest sources of daily stress for a lot of us. It's that tension between, trying to maintain this rigid identity, performing who we think we should be, versus the freedom you get when you just live by your actual chosen values.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, are you constantly auditioning for your own life, or are you actually living it? That's the core question here.
Right.
And the mission today, really, is to find a kind of roadmap out of that exhaustion. Because we often, maybe unconsciously, we outsource our self-worth, right?
Yeah.
We make our value dependent on these external things.
Like checking boxes, getting approval.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How many things we accomplish, what other people think. And that inevitably leads to that awful feeling of, I have to do this, that sense of duty. What we're looking for is how to get to, I choose to do this, finding real meaning.
That shift sounds crucial.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where do we start? I think right at the beginning, with how easily we fall into this trap, this self-imposed identity thing.
Yeah.
The sources kick off with the story about Carter. He was like the designated smart kid back home. Gets to college, tries to keep that label going. He signs up for multivariate calculus.
Ambitious.
Very. But then, it gets tough.
Yeah.
So what does he do? He drops it for linear algebra, something he sees as, safer.
And here's the kicker, right? Even after switching to the supposedly easier course, he was still stressed out, still completely drained.
So it wasn't just the math itself.
Not at all. The pressure wasn't the material, it was the label.
Yeah.
That SMART label came with these internal rules he'd created, like, I have to know all the answers right away, or I can't look confused.
Wow.
So the idea that he might actually struggle in math, that threatened his whole identity. And that fear led him to ditch a class he was genuinely interested in for something safer, even like retaking intro bio or something he already knew.
And we all do this, don't we, with all sorts of labels, good or bad, like I'm a caregiver or I'm socially awkward, maybe I'm a runner, a perfectionist.
Totally. And sometimes they're fine, even sources of pride. But the problem starts when we overevaluate them, when they become these strict rules that dictate everything we do.
Yeah, I remember that line from one of the sources. It really stuck with me. People would rather be consistent than happy. Oof.
It's brutal, isn't it?
Wow.
But consistency feels safe. It gives us certainty, a sense of control. If I know who I am, I know the script, I know what I'm supposed to do, I can avoid risk. But that pull towards consistency can box us in tighter than, what was the phrase, an Escalade in a Manhattan parking garage.
Ha! That's vivid.
It is. So if your label is lazy, you might actively avoid trying something new like jujitsu, even if a part of you wants to, because, well, lazy people just binge watch shows, right? That's the script.
Or the introvert who wouldn't dream of doing spontaneous karaoke even if it looks fun.
Exactly. The label says no.
Okay, but what about positive labels, like labeling yourself disciplined or hardworking? Isn't that kind of consistency sometimes, necessary to achieve big things? How do we tell the good kind from the restrictive kind?
That really is the core question, isn't it? And the difference, I think, lies in the motivation behind it. Is the label driven by avoidance, by fear, by needing external validation? Or is it aligned with something deeper, a value?
Okay.
Take that client example. The one who felt his Mormon faith meant he absolutely could not hit the dance floor at a college party.
Right, even though he wanted to.
Yeah. He longed to dance, but the label just screamed, avoid,
Oh.
even though he was only drinking LaCroix. Yeah.
Right.
In that case, his consistency wasn't really rooted in a freely chosen value like, say, reverence or community connection. It was more about fear of breaking a perceived rule.
And then you layer on modern life, social media. It just amplifies this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. Social media is like pouring gasoline on this label fire. You see posts like 5 signs you have anxiety or those personality quizzes.
They can feel validating at first, right? Like, oh, that explains it.
Exactly. They help you name an experience.
Yeah.
But they can quickly morph into these rigid definitions. Okay, the algorithm says I listen to the same sad song on repeat, so I must have anxiety, which means I must be socially awkward, so I definitely shouldn't try talking to that new person at work.
Wow, it becomes a whole chain reaction defined from the outside.
Precisely. These external labels create these strictures, these rules that define us from the outside in, rather than from our own internal compass.
Okay, so that sets up the alternative perfectly. This is the pivot point. If not these restrictive labels, what does motivate us in a healthier way? The answer is our values.
Yes.
Values are described as our North Star, right? The qualities that guide how we actually want to live, things like honesty or hard work, generosity, creativity.
They're the qualities of the action, not the endpoint or the outcome. And this is where the sources get really helpful, particularly Dr. Tuhig and Dr. Ong. They outline 4 key components that make something a true value, differentiating it from just an obligation or a goal.
Okay, let's break those down. The first 2 seem pretty straightforward. A value has to be freely chosen. It can't be forced or feel like a have to.
Correct. No coercion involved.
And second, it needs to be intrinsically meaningful, meaning you care about it for its own sake, even if nobody else ever knew you were doing it. It's for you.
Exactly. It resonates internally.
Yeah.
Then the third one, this is where people sometimes get tripped up. A true value needs to be within your control.
What does that mean exactly?
It means it can't depend on other people's reactions or choices. Like being loved isn't a value you can control, but being loving is an action you can choose. Getting approval isn't controllable, but being helpful is.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. You control the output, not the input from others.
Right. And the fourth component is key for distinguishing values from goals. A value must be continuous. It's a direction, not a destination you arrive at.
Like the example, make $1 million is a goal, a finish line. But financial security or maybe resourcefulness could be the underlying value, something you can always move towards.
Precisely. Or going west is a value, a direction. Visiting Australia is a goal, a specific destination. It's a subtle but really powerful distinction.
It feels like it changes everything.
It really does, because the fundamental difference is this. With those rigid labels, we feel we have to do things and maintain the image. With values, we choose to do them. And because we choose them freely, based on what's meaningful to us, we're often willing to put up with discomfort or inconvenience along the way.
Because the action itself has meaning.
Exactly. It's not just about the outcome.
Let's use that parent example from the sources. If you're operating under the label good parent, you might feel you have to constantly fix your kids' problems, jump in, solve things. That's the performance of the label.
Right, the checklist.
But if you shift to the value of, say, attentiveness, suddenly you have flexibility. Attentiveness might mean helping solve the problem, or it might mean seeing your kid is overwhelmed and deciding, okay, the most attentive thing right now is actually to give you some space.
Yeah, because that's what's genuinely helpful in that moment. Aligned with the value, not just fulfilling the role. And that internal shift changes the quality of the action, even if, from the outside, the action looks identical.
Like Ramon's story, the grad student.
Perfect example.
Okay.
So Ramon was productive, sure. But initially, he was driven by what he called the beating stick, this constant fear that the only acceptable thing is excellence. Failure wasn't an option.
Sounds exhausting.
Totally. But when he shifted his focus, reoriented towards his values, things like competence, contribution, being helpful, he was still productive. The actions looked similar, but the motivation changed completely. It went from fear of failure to finding actual meaning in the work itself, connecting it to his purpose.
Okay, so that leads us right into this core problem, especially in high-achieving cultures. Overevaluation. We start mixing up what we do with who we fundamentally are.
Yeah, the sources say we overvalue performance and undervalue the self. It's like we put all our self-worth eggs into one single basket, the performance basket. And it's a very high-stakes basket.
And the result isn't usually fulfillment, is it?
Rarely. It often leads to deep dissatisfaction, loneliness, burnout, disconnection, even for people who look incredibly successful on the outside. The example of Yo-Yo Ma, the world-class cellist, is just so powerful here.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
So he was obviously hyper-focused on technique, on accuracy, on playing every note perfectly. He was aiming for the flawless concert. But he describes this moment, mid-concert, where everything was going technically perfectly, and he realized he was utterly bored out of my mind.
Wow. In the middle of a performance, that must have been a shock.
A huge shock. And that was his turning point, his moment of reckoning. He asked himself that critical question, am I trying to get it right? Or am I trying to find something?
That's a profound difference.
It is. He realized he needed to shift his life's focus from human perfection towards human expression. He wasn't bored because the music itself was boring. He was bored because his motivation had become purely technical, almost self-serving, instead of being about communication, expression, connecting with the music and the audience.
So if the goal isn't just flawless performance, what does choosing expression feel like?
Well, it probably feels riskier, right?
Okay.
His expression is vulnerable, but it's also genuine. It allows for imperfection, for interpretation, for connection.
Okay, so that realization is foundational to sort of come home to ourselves. We need to take some of those eggs out of that high-pressure performance basket,
Exactly. And distribute them into what the sources call the forgotten baskets:
which are,
connection and enjoyment.
okay, let's tackle connection first. The sources make this really interesting point that perfectionism, it looks like a personal internal struggle, but it's often fundamentally interpersonal.
Yeah, they use this academic phrase, prioritizing agency over communion.
Okay, agency over communion. Break that down for us.
Sure. Basically, agency is about acting effectively in the world, proving competence, getting things done. Communion is about belonging, connecting, sharing vulnerability. So agency over communion means we prioritize proving our worth, agency, over simply connecting and belonging, communion.
We perform to earn our place.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We internalize this message that we have to be excellent, impressive, useful to be worthy of connection, to belong.
That really resonates. And Gus, the cookware designer in the source material, he's a prime example of this struggle.
He is. He was always trying so hard to radiate competence, choosing the right craft beer, steering conversation smoothly. But then his friends start doing silly impressions, just goofing off.
And he froze.
Totally. He said he felt incompetent at acting stupid. He couldn't join in because he couldn't let go of his performance standards. His usual strategy, try harder, get better, was completely useless for just relaxing and being silly with friends.
So the paradox is, chasing admiration can actually make us feel more alone, right? Because it singles us out. True connection happens when we feel accepted without having to put on a show.
Precisely. Connection isn't really a skill you master. It's more like a vulnerability you allow yourself to share. For Gus, the shift meant focusing more on listening, on sharing his work projects before they were perfectly polished, asking friends for input sometimes.
So less, look at my perfect sculpture.
And more, hey, look at this cool rock I found. Can you help me figure it out?
Yeah.
Sharing the process, not just the perfect result. It makes work less draining and connection more possible.
That shift from agency to communion, it also shows up in Dima's story, the other cellist.
Yes, and for Dima, what's fascinating is the actions didn't even change. It was all internal.
Yeah.
She gets invited to lunch by some master's students she admires.
Okay. High pressure.
Right. So she works really hard during lunch to be funny, agreeable, impressive, basically performing to earn their acceptance.
Because she thought that's what they wanted.
Exactly. Her big realization was needing to trust that maybe, just maybe, they actually liked her, the person, not just her performance. She admitted it felt harder, more vulnerable, because if rejection came, it would feel more personal.
But the connection would be real.
Infinitely more real. The internal pressure dissolved, even if the external actions, having lunch, chatting, looked the same.
Okay, that covers connection.
What about the other forgotten basket? Enjoyment.
Ah, enjoyment. Yes. We get that great image of Warren Buffett playing the ukulele alongside John Bon Jovi at some conference.
He's not exactly Jimi Hendrix on the ukulele, is he?
Not even close. But he looks like he's having the absolute time of his life. And that's the point. You don't have to be good at something to enjoy it.
That feels almost revolutionary in a productivity-obsessed world.
It really is. Because enjoyment is often the first casualty when we're stuck in that performance mindset. Joy becomes suspect unless it's linked to an achievement like hitting a PR at the gym or getting a glowing review. We forget joy can just be joy.
We need to reclaim it as a value in itself, definitely. And the sources talk about two types of enjoyment. There's type 1, which is hedonic, pleasurable, right in the moment, like, eating a really good funfetti cupcake. Pure pleasure.
Cupcake.
Right. Then there's type 2, which is eudaimonic enjoyment. This is more about challenge, engagement, and deep satisfaction. Think about the feeling after biking up a really steep hill or finally grasping a complex idea. It's hard work, but deeply rewarding.
And we need both types.
Absolutely. A balanced life includes both the simple pleasures and the satisfying struggles.
And there's a connection point here too, isn't there? About imperfection being relatable.
Yes. It's much harder to connect with someone who seems perfect. They're aspirational maybe, but distant. But watching someone wipe out on the bunny slope and then get up laughing, that invites connection. It shows you value the activity itself, not just being good at it. It builds trust.
Okay, so we've filled the connection and enjoyment baskets, but we do need to circle back to performance. It's still important, right? We have to function in the world.
Absolutely. The performance basket isn't bad. It just needs context and refinement. This is where the idea of contingent self-worth comes in that feeling of, I am what I do. The sources mention two main types.
Okay.
There's success-based worth, where your value depends on achieving certain results or outcomes. And then there's activity-based worth, where your value comes from simply being busy, productive, goal-oriented. Both tie your worth directly to the doing.
And that brings us to Peter's story.
Right. Peter was bullied as a kid, and he internalized this deep feeling of inadequacy. So decades later, in work meetings, his internal standard for feeling adequate wasn't just contribute usefully. It was, and this is a quote, jaw on the floor standing ovation.
Wow, that's an impossible standard for a Tuesday morning meeting.
Completely impossible and totally uncontrollable because it depended entirely on his colleagues' reactions. Would they be bedazzled? Probably not.
So what happened?
Because the bar was impossibly high. And every potential comment felt like this huge referendum on his fundamental worth. He just clammed up. He became silent, avoidant. Trying to control the uncontrollable left him powerless.
So how did he adjust? How do you refine that performance basket?
The shift for Peter was moving his focus away from the outcome, admiration, the standing ovation, which he couldn't control, and onto the actions he could control,
Like what?
like being prepared for the meeting, like genuinely trying to be helpful, like offering his knowledge simply for the sake of the work itself, speaking with clarity, focusing on the value, maybe contribution or helpfulness, rather than the external validation.
That puts the power back in his hands.
Exactly. It puts you in a higher power position because you're focused on your own actions and intentions, not desperately seeking a specific reaction from others.
This feels like the key to breaking that all or nothing thinking, which leads us to the practical tool, the wiggle room template.
Yes. This might be the single most useful takeaway. It's a simple sentence structure that creates that crucial separation between your actions and your fundamental worth. It gives you permission to be human.
Okay, what is it?
The template is, I'm a positive, quality-valued trait person who sometimes makes a mistake. As an exception.
Okay, give me an example. Like for Peter, if he says something in a meeting that falls flat.
Instead of his old script, I'm inadequate, I blew it, the new script, the wiggle room script, could be, I'm a knowledgeable person who sometimes offers a less than perfect solution. Or, I'm a thoughtful person who sometimes misreads the room.
Ah, I see. It separates the person from the specific action. The focus is on the action being flawed, not the person.
Precisely. It acknowledges the reality of the situation. Yeah, that comment didn't land without it becoming a global indictment of your character.
Let's give the listener a few more they can try on. I'm a smart person who sometimes doesn't know the answer.
Perfect. Or, I'm a capable person who sometimes screws things up.
I'm a hard worker who sometimes procrastinates.
Exactly. It replaces that harsh self-judgment with just an observation. This happened, and I am still fundamentally positive trait. It maintains the core value while acknowledging the temporary setback. It gives us back agency.
So bringing this all together for the week ahead, the task, it seems, is to consciously think about those three baskets. Performance but refined, focused on controllable actions and values, then connection leaning into vulnerability, and enjoyment just for its own sake.
Yeah, distributing those eggs. And maybe we end by circling back to Carter, the smart kid. His final realization really captures the difference between duty and choice.
Remind us.
And remember when he ended up taking care of his sick girlfriend all weekend, fetching Gatorade, tissues, the whole thing? Objectively, it was inconvenient. It messed up his plans.
Right, loss of a Saturday.
But because he chose to do it, because it was an act aligned with his values of care, of love, of connection, he didn't feel resentful. He didn't, as the source said, chafe under the loss of his Saturday. The action might look like a duty, but the motivation was choice. And that felt completely different.
That's the feeling we're aiming for. Okay, so here's the final thought for you, the listener. As you look at your schedule for this week, for every meeting, every task, every interaction, ask yourself, am I running towards something meaningful, something aligned with my chosen values? Or am I mostly running away from letting someone down, away from potential failure, away from damaging a label I'm trying to uphold?
And maybe, just maybe, what's one small choice you could make this week that feels genuinely freely chosen, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable or goes against the usual script?
What choice could lead you away from duty and towards meaning? We'll leave you with that to think about.